after losing friends to suicide, crisis-trained barber Sam Dowdall began travelling around the country on a mission to change the perception of men's mental health, one haircut at a time. And Sam has just recently been announced as the winner of the Australian Men's Mental Health Award, winner of the ACT People's Choice Award, and a finalist for the National Prize for Best Overall Mental Health Project for Australia. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much.
That's okay. Thanks for coming in, mate. Sam is known as the Barter Barber. Why are you known as the Barter Barber?
So for the last 5-6 years, I travelled around New Zealand swapping haircuts for goods and services rather than money.
Yeah.
The idea for that was to break down barriers to entry, getting people into my chair and using that time in my chair to talk to men about mental health, communication and masculinity. Things that, especially in regional New Zealand, and now I'm learning regional Australia, are really hard conversations for these guys to find places to have, or even have feel like they're allowed to have them.
Yeah. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Zealand, as you could probably tell by my mouthful of water accent, and in a little place called Mount Maunganui.
North or South Island?
There's North Island, about 3 hours south of Auckland on the east coast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Beautiful little town. When I was growing up there, it was like Ulladulla. It's a lot more like surfers now. Yeah, the money came in, and we moved out.
Grown up. So, when did you get to Australia?
I got to Australia, coming up 2 years ago now.
Yep.
It was in the middle of the pandemic and the first green flights from New Zealand to Australia. We could move over at that time without quarantine, just because of how New Zealand was performing with the pandemic. And I've been here ever since.
Cool. And now you've got the Ken Oath Barber Shop, don't you?
I do. We've built that, and it's been a lot of fun and a lot of twists and turns. But I'm really, really proud of it.
And we're waiting for it to get on the road, aren't we?
Oh, yes, we are. We're working one cut at a time towards that. But it's also been a bonding experience for my younger brothers and I, getting to know each other again through building it together, and it's also been like a bit of a ticket to a life after death, after looking after my father for the last year and a half.
And so why did you start it in the first place in New Zealand? What was going on in your life at the time that you thought this needs to happen?
It was a mixture of losing a lot of friends to suicide over a very short amount of time, but also working as a barber, having that interpersonal connection with guys, and them coming in and being like, how are you? And oh yeah, good. And by the second or third time, you've got this guy coming in and he's going, oh well, my wife's left me, or well, this is the issue in my life at the moment. And I was hearing anger and I was hearing frustration, and it took me a wee while to register that those aren't the feelings that were coming through. It was sadness, it was loss, it was regret, but they were being shown as anger and frustration because those were the two emotions that these guys were allowed.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's not a lot of places that men can go to have those discussions, or we don't set up enough places. Put it that way. Us as a society don't set up enough places for men to go and talk about that stuff, do we?
Absolutely, and I think that we're going faster towards it, but we've also got a lot of cultural hangover that sits over those conversations. So the responsibility on ourselves is a really hard place for a lot of men to be. And it's really easy to pass that responsibility on to other people in our life, whether that be our kids or our wives or our partners.
Did you find that was also a cultural thing in New Zealand?
I think it's a cultural thing in Australasia.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, because I'm seeing it here as well. But I've also lived, time in the States, and different parts of the States, and they're vastly different, these cultural ideologies. The kind of cup of concrete mentality, taking a hard nut pill. Those things are really prevalent in Australasia, and trying to get past that idea of speaking equals weakness is still a really, really big part of the conversation we're having today.
And it's like you said, it's a cultural thing in Australasia and probably in the Western world itself. because of that cultural thing where men were the breadwinner for so long, and the keeping the family together and defending the family and all those sort of things. And now that environment's changing, and a lot of men are finding, oh, okay, where do I now fit in? Because my culture has taught me this, but the world around me is changing so much.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of fear in that, and with fear comes rejection. So we've got particular people having conversations about what men should do, and that kind of somehow negates completely the woman's responsibilities, which is absolute BS.
Yeah.
And when we look at that objectively, that is BS. But to be able to have the conversation and take our own ownership back, it is a cultural thing. It's that kind of idea of like, I am the antithesis of safety for my family. I am the antithesis of breadwinning for my family. I have to be that person. Nobody's asking you to be that person, a lot of the time. We put that on ourselves.
Yeah.
And so taking those weights off that we've been putting on ourselves culturally needs to only starts from actually having a look at ourselves as men. As men, we've never had our feminist movement, because feminism, we've always had the power, number one, but we've never taken a step back from our gender and had a look at it and gone, do I agree with these roles? Because that's a very, very scary thing to do, because we put so much of our self-worth into those roles.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because, you're like, that's what your life is. That's your identity.
Absolutely.
And then what is my other identity? Can I fit in somewhere else? And I think that the feminist movement is actually allowing us to look at
Absolutely.
that and go, hang on, we can fit in somewhere else within there and not lose anything because of it. And I think we did have that power, but we don't lose anything by losing that power, actually. So
that's right. We actually gain a lot more. And recently I've actually been looking into the ideals of masculinity that have come from our parents' generations, post-war.
Yeah.
And now that what we understand about PTSD, these guys have come back home from war with PTSD, and we have, as men, looked at these guys and gone, that's the antithesis of men. That is the hardest man. That is the idea. Without realizing how hurt and broken those men were coming home. And so we actually have a cultural shockwave that has come through from, World War II, all the way through to our ideals of men. And so we can actually look outside of, the really strong patriarchal Western culture and start looking into other cultures, whether it be First Nations people, whether it be Māori, myself, and having a look at the ideas and the attributes of men within that system, because they're very different. And I think that's a worthy conversation to be had.
The Polynesian cultures overall have a very strong feminine leadership, don't they? The women are very strong in those cultures, while the men physically are imposing. But it's the women who basically run those groups.
Absolutely. And even looking at I'm from a Māori background. Looking at Māori, we have tāne, and tāne has a whole different set of rules to what that looks like to be masculine, and it doesn't include the penis. It includes the way that you hold yourself and the way that you hold the others around you, and so taking away from that and having a really nuanced look at what makes us masculine, it actually heals everybody. It really it stops the performative aspect. I mean, all gender is performative, really, but having a look at that aspect is I think it's really, really interesting, and it's something that the Generation Z have really, really dug deep into, start unfolding, because they can see that it's not working. And it hasn't worked for us for a long time. A lot of these guys that have gone out into farms and factories and abattoirs and worked with, they know it's not working too, but to be able to have a conversation where it doesn't look like something's being taken away from them, we're so used to starvation economies where if you take something away, it's taking away from something else.
Yeah.
But we know that love isn't a starvation economy. We know that giving of ourselves isn't a starvation economy, because the love that I give to my mother doesn't take the love from my father.
No.
And so when we're looking at it in those kind of ways, we can actually see in a more holistic sense what masculinity looks like these days, and it is confronting.
So what do you see the benefits of, and why did you go down that path of being a barber and dealing with men, or talking about men's mental health in that environment?
I saw the barriers to entry.
Yeah.
And, we see a lot of barriers to entry as far as a lot of these guys won't go and see a doctor when they're sick because they're hardening up. A lot of these guys won't go and, take any load off their shoulders. They'll put more on when they're stressed.
Yeah.
And so dealing with that, Bobo, haere mai, e nohora, stop. Thank you. Sorry, just talking to the
We've
dog.
got a multilingual dog as well.
Yeah. And so going out to their soil, and sitting at their table, eating with them to hear their story, is what true empathy is to me. And so to be able to empathize, to be able to hear them, because in the end, us guys, we're so focused on fixing, when a lot of us just need to be heard.
Yeah.
So going out there and hearing their story, and then maybe offering a way that they can hear each other. Because again, when you teach a lot of men that they don't have to fix, that they don't have to come up with a solution, that they can sit with somebody and they can hear them through, that is a huge breakthrough, and that's kind of what took me out there, because changing the ideas of true empathy rather than pity.
Yes.
Because when we sit in the cities and we look down on these guys out in rural places, it's all just full of pity, and pity doesn't help anybody. We have to be on their land, in their space, learning their life, understanding where they're coming from, and we can go, all right, well, if you don't realize that the guy down the road feels the exact same as you, and you guys can talk about it, and as long as he knows that you're not going to try and fix his shit, and you're, vice versa, you can actually start having some kind of commune there and community, and come back to that idea of building each other up and keeping each other safe.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure a lot of city people don't understand the life of someone on the land. And especially recently, where we've had bushfires, we've had floods, we've had all those interruptions to them making their living. I mean, us people in the city were comfortable in getting our handouts and knowing we could still go down to the local shop and get something to eat. But they were on the land and they were seeing things dying or burnt or things like that. And that was their livelihood, and that's their life.
Absolutely. At home, we, have had a real problem with rural suicide.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't realise is that the guys that are coming and cutting these guys down are the local firefighters, who are volunteers, who are their neighbours.
Yeah.
And so within that space, that is a reverberating thing. And being able to get out there and go, all right, where's the matchstick that we pull out here so we don't keep burning?
Yeah.
Where is the piece that we can actually put help, and what can we get from the city that's actually going to help you guys? Because there's no point in us telling you what to do. We need to listen to what you need.
Yes.
And that's a big difference.
I did some work up in central west of New South Wales, and there was a group out there who were doing what you were talking about. They'd go out to the farms and they'd set up at the farms and have the hay bales and a fire and food, and get the local blokes to come along and have a chat.
Heck yeah.
And not telling them what to do, but letting them chat between themselves and setting up. And this is the same as This Is My Brave, setting up a safe and supportive place to talk about things. Not force them to talk, not bring them into an office or a room or something like that. They're of the land. Go out to the land, go and talk to them. They'll tell you about what's going on. And then hopefully then you can bring something to the table for them. But if you don't listen and don't hear their stories, I mean, that's what This Is My Brave is all about, is about sharing stories so we can find out what's going on. So, and those stories can also be a guide for other people.
Absolutely.
That's the best thing about it.
Absolutely. Finding the leadership out there has been a really big part of when we were out there in the barbershop, because just like rumours, good news spreads like wildfire too.
Yeah.
You know, and so when you get out there, a lot of guys will be standoffish because they're like, oh, you want me to get into my stuff, or you want me to talk about it. I'm like, I don't. I want to give you a get laid fade. I want to watch your shoulders go back and your head come up. If you've got access to some of the stuff, or you want to hear some of the stuff that I've done, absolutely. But I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you to break into me, you know, to let it all out. I just want to give you the space that you can. And so therefore my vulnerability breeds their vulnerability, because there's no point in coming in with our arms crossed and being like, well, what you need to do is, or like, you know, but if I can tell my story as well, and show them why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Because especially after not working for cash for so long, they realize I'm not taking anything from them.
Yeah.
And that I would just want to have that experience. And shit, I get so much from it. You know, whether it be learning about these guys, learning about the work that they do, learning, you know, it's all just beautiful knowledge and stories. And to me, that's a life well led.
It's interesting because you're basically giving them permission to talk about it,
right.
aren't you? They're going into a space, and you've said this to me before about that space is a very vulnerable space for someone to be touching your head and be right next to you and doing all that, and you feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
But
I stand over you. I'm imposing, and as you say, like for a lot of these men, outside of maybe their father, I'm the first one to touch them on the face.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of vulnerability to let me, and sometimes, a lot of the time, they'll kick, you know, they'll try and emasculate me or something like that. Oh yeah, you're a little fruity or something, aren't you? And that's fine, because that's their way of just getting comfortable in the seat.
Releasing the tension.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And then they will go straight to telling me a secret about themselves.
Yeah.
They'll go straight to just giving that vulnerability, because again, you have to give vulnerability to get vulnerability. So they'll tell me something deep and dark that they wouldn't tell anybody. I'm a brand new stranger, but because of the physical imposition of me being above them, and also the cutthroat razor being wrapped around, also be changing what they look like. You know, all of these things make for a perfect storm of getting that vulnerability back out, and it's something that I'm really proud of, and something that's a very, very powerful 20 minutes. And that's the whole dedication right there. 20 minutes.
It is, and it's once they do it, they go. And look, I know because I've been there. You've given me a couple of good cuts. I'm due for another one. And it's just that feeling of okay, not that you come out a new person, but you've got a little bit of a different view than when you went in. You look different.
Yeah.
And you feel just that little bit different as well.
There's the physical reflection and the emotional reflection. So the mirror actually plays a role in this as well. And a lot of the time, I can see if a guy's looking at himself and he's feeling really uncomfortable, I'll spin him around. Yeah. You know, because sometimes that's actually too much. Yeah. Too much to deal with, too much to reflect on. But when he gets spun back around and he looks at himself and he goes, oh, I look good. You know, I look good and I feel good. And again, those shoulders go back, that head goes up, the phone comes out, he snaps the selfie, maybe the first selfie. You can tell it's the first selfie for a lot of guys because they got both the hands up, you know, sideways, like, but it's heading off to the wife. Yeah. You know, and in that space, he feels proud of himself. And he's taken a load off. And, you know, it's a small thing for us to do, but for some of these guys, when I come back into those communities 6 months later, they're using the same language as I've used with them. Yeah. They're using that same thing, or even I'll get to a next community, which is sometimes a couple 100 kilometers away, and these guys are already using my language because they've talked on the phone to somebody else from another part, or another, you know, Farm Strong or one of these organizations. And that's how you know that it's worth doing. It's
and we call it with our stories of the ripple effect, is that someone comes in and gets a haircut, they talk to their family about the haircut, and this guy Sam that I met, and we had a bit of a chat, and then they tell somebody, and then they tell somebody, but within that is a bit of a mental health chat at the same time. He talked to me about this, and he said these things. I thought he was really good. And then somebody else hears that, and that gets passed on. And like you said, by the time you go back, that language is starting to be used because from what I've found, they've been looking for the language. Yes. They just don't know what it was.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of the time there's worry about emasculation around that, and like totally fair, because a lot of these programs that are made to come out, they go, well, you're doing it wrong, you know? And so when we change that language and we give them the tools themselves, it's straight away they're like, oh yeah, I get this. And especially intergenerational stuff, because a lot of the traumas that we're looking here are passed down from generation to generation. When a guy realizes that he doesn't have to fix his son, the worries he's got about the computer gaming, or the worries he's got about the rough and tumble, or whatever it might be, or going off to college, he doesn't have to fix that. Or when his wife comes and says, hey, I've got this issue with this, that he doesn't have to fix that. That's the start of taking the first of those blocks off. And it's up to him then to find where the rest of those blocks sit. And that's a journey. That's a wonderful journey.
It is. It is. So what's your process? So you hook up the barbershop.
Yep. So check it on the back. And so what I like to do is I'll start off with, say I'm coming into a small town. I'll find out what the main industry is there, the main male-dominated industry, and I'll give the boss or the CEO a message. I'll be like, look, I'm coming down. I've got a whole bunch of haircuts. You don't have to do anything for me. I'm just going to come in, and they'll be like, oh, I don't know. These guys are a bunch of hard nuts. And I get that all the time. These guys are too hard to have this conversation with. They're too strong and they're too masculine for this conversation. You'll get laughed out of here. Not once have I ever been laughed out of a place. Every single time they know it's needed. But once I get into that first town, then I talk to somebody and he's like, oh yeah, no, we've got a snooker game on Thursday nights down here. And I'll come down to the snooker game or the pub or wherever those guys are, and I get passed around to where I'm needed. And I listen to that, and a lot of the time I'll use the media as well. The beautiful thing about media, especially in smaller places, is that all you have to do is find the notice board. So you go on Facebook, you find the notice board, you go, hey, this is my story, here's a little bit of media about me. That gets passed around, you'll get a message from someone being like, hey, we want to do a story. We run that story, and in a small town, when you're on the front page of a paper, everyone goes, oh, you're that person. And that's a really easy way to get into those communities as well. So it's just kind of knocking on doors. When I was 15, I sold vacuum cleaners door to door. And something that it teaches you about that is that if you come in with humility and you're giving something away for free, everybody wants to be your friend. And I use that same kind of mentality. Bo, my dog here, is a big part of that as well. He's a character. I'm a character. And it's actually a lot easier for people to talk to a character rather than another person. So putting that mask on and being that character for these people is also part of that kind of access. And you're a very open person. You're not closed off, which is very welcoming for people. They come up to you, and like anybody who gets a haircut, there's a little bit of anxiety there, and sometimes the person will talk to you, and sometimes they're really nice. And I find personally, I'm happier about my haircut if the person who's cutting my hair is really open and nice and we have a good chat. And I go, oh, it's an awesome haircut. But if I don't go out feeling the same way. So you as a personality have got that openness that people go, oh, I'll talk to this person. And you've got Bobo there. Animals are such an opener, aren't they? They Absolutely.
Really are.
So when we sit as men across from each other like this, this is confrontation. It's built for confrontation, and we sit and we go like this. And I always used to think this was closing off. I'm folding my arms at the moment. I always thought this was closing off, and I was talking to a friend of mine who does body language as a job for the New Zealand police. And she's like, Sam, you're an idiot. And I'm like, what? It's like, this is a self hug. This is self-soothing. So now when I see guys crossing their arms and they're listening to me, I realize that I'm hitting a place that's vulnerable to them. And so what we need to do there is, if they're not going to get a haircut, we need to find something side by side that we can do. And we can get our hands busy. And this is something that I teach men is, if you want to talk to your sons, if you want to have communications with valid, deep communications with the men in your life, go and do something that's side by side and your hands are busy, because there is a space made there that you can have those conversations. Doing the dishes is one, going fishing is one, going hunting, fixing a car, all these things that are interpersonal and moving with the hands. That's where we get to have that vulnerability. So it is just as much about getting the dog, and he's got a big dreaded mullet, getting them to play with that mullet.
Yeah.
And sitting there, and as soon as the hands start moving and we're side by side, he can let something out.
Yeah.
And if I hit something that's a little bit too tender, he'll talk about the hair. He'll be like, oh, look at all these cords. Or, just like if with a car, you'd be like, oh, the alternator's a little bit broken, or something like that. So it can be shifted from the task to the conversation, to the task to the conversation. And that's invaluable information to somebody that's trying to communicate with the man in their life.
Yeah, oh, definitely. We wanted to do doggy talk. It was as part of because we do our listening posts where we get people to come along if they want to share their stories in a safe environment. But then we always thought we need to have an animal there because, like you said, that touching the animal and having something else to focus on, because some of the stuff they get into can get pretty deep. Yep. But if you've got something else to focus on, something to touch, and people, you're right, some people are tactile. They need to touch things.
Absolutely.
They need to be in touch with things as well.
Yep.
So what's the future for the Ken Oath Barber Shop?
So we're fundraising for a truck at the moment.
Yep.
That's our big one. So we're just trying to find some partners. I originally came here to look after my father.
Yeah.
And Bo, stop. Sorry, Bo's starting to get a little roll around the stage.
You're getting bored, aren't you?
Yeah, he is. So yeah, I originally came to look after my father, and so it has been sitting at the front of his old house.
Yep.
And we're, the last month he passed, so we're finally getting to move that into that next stage, which is get the truck, get some sponsors, get people that believe in the cause.
Yep.
Chuck it on the back of the truck. I want to be able to go from here to Ulladulla and back around Bateman's Bay, all that kind of area, the little triangle, and start going and having these conversations, going into places where they don't have barbershops, going into places where they don't have access, places like Cooma, all those little areas, especially seasonal areas, because the people that are left on the off season are the people I need to be talking to.
Yes.
And so going and giving that kind of access, and then from there, I would actually starting a YouTube channel, which is just focusing not on me, not on the dog, but very much like what you do, which is giving the microphone over, using our privilege and our position to be able to tell other people's stories and let them tell their stories to the world. So somebody somewhere can hear that and go, I'm not alone. Because it's that loneliness that we come across so often, the loneliness and the feelings of rejection, feelings of not belonging. All of those things are the things that eat us up inside. I was reading a study just a couple of weeks ago that was saying that the feelings of rejection and loneliness hit the same centers of the brain as physical pain does. And to me, that makes so much sense. I put that on silent, I swear. But yeah, so getting out there, getting these people's stories heard, and being able to reiterate that has been really, really important. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to produce. I've been putting together a pitch for the ABC. Yep. I'd like to make some television around that, and connect with some of the other amazing groups that are in Australia. Just sharing our perspective and the way that we do things. Yeah,
look, like you said, the same as us. Sharing stories is an age-old way of passing on knowledge. Yeah. And I think as much as we're connected, as much as we've ever been, especially through social media, we're still not passing on the knowledge that is needed, the important knowledge. We're too distracted by all the pretty pictures and the sounds and all that sort of thing, but we never actually get the real stories that we need out there for people to listen to and understand and go, people have been through this before, so here's a guide for you. Absolutely. So if you're going through it at the same time, maybe you could follow this journey that they're on, and that may help you. So
absolutely. Like I often think about, your mid-teens, when we were mid-teenagers, and we thought there was something wrong with us, every single one of us. We all thought that there was something wrong, that we were outcasts, that, there was some kind of secret that we held that nobody else had. And now that we're older, we can sit and we can talk about that, and we can go, how funny was it that we were so insecure, that we had so much hurt, and we carried around so much of the stuff with us. That's still true today. Because that little part that you're thinking of, you're not alone. That piece that you're ashamed of, that shame is carried with many people, and being able to connect and tell those stories with vulnerability and with integrity.
Yeah.
And integrity is a big part of that, because as you say, in the social media world, it's look at me, look at my things, look at it's so wonderful.
Yeah.
But it's not all wonderful. It's pretty shitty. And it's okay to be shitty. It's all right that these are hard times, and sometimes I wish, we hear that these day and ages are life's shit and it's a shit time to be. I wish people could see the work that people around our spaces do.
Yes.
Because if you could see these people that are going out and doing this work, that are tirelessly out there in the community, that are doing the little parts and picking up the little pieces, you'd have a very different idea of what the world looked like.
Yeah, and I think that getting these stories out and using social media, get those stories out, also gets to people who may not be in the inner circle of what we do, and they're the people that I try to reach out to. Is going, you know nothing about mental health, nothing. You're suffering from it, but you've never been involved or talked about it. Here's a story that you could probably relate to, and it's about a mother, a father, a son or a daughter, a cousin, an uncle. They've got jobs, they've got family, and you go, oh, they're exactly the same as me, aren't they? Yeah. They're no different from me. Hang on, I don't feel that lonely or isolated because I know there's other people who are going through the same thing. And that's what we try to reach out is to those people, because mental health issues can make you feel isolated, lonely, and worthless. That's the hard part.
Absolutely. I know that when I'm going through a depression, that's the first thing I want to do, is isolate, withdraw, put myself into a little cocoon of Sam, and do anything not to feel. Yeah. And so I've been sober for 2 years now, and I've just gone through some really, really hard stuff. I've got to a point in my life where I want to feel. Yeah. I want to feel it, and I want to feel it now, because I know that if I don't feel these things, I'm just planting seeds for them to pop out in other parts of my life, and I've not got the time for that anymore. I want to be able to have the mope, but I also want to be able to have the community that I don't have to have resilience. Yeah. My idea of a perfect world is that none of us have resilience. That we're all big cushy balls of because that's the ideal, the ideal is that somebody else is there to remind us of our worth. Somebody is there to remind us of that we're not alone, and that community has our back. And for a lot of us in this individualistic world that we've been sold an ideal that individualism is better than community, we're starting to see the ills of that, and this disposable world as well, where everything is commodified and brought and sold and then disposed of. We miss the parts of the world which are held close, that are repaired, the relationships that get broken into pieces, and then we repair it with time and love and energy, because we know that it's worth it and they're stronger for it. It's so much easier to throw things and people away, but it's so much more worthy to bring them back together and take the time, have accountability, and work through that accountability to know ourselves better and to know that we can rely on the people around us.
Whenever you see any recent reports around mental health and what needs to be done, the one word that keeps popping up in all of it is community. It's community, because it's actually up to us to do it. We can't rely on governments to look after this. We can't. They can give us the money to do it.
Great scapegoat, though.
Yeah, it is.
Great scapegoat to turn around and be like, oh, wicked, what we need to do is we need to get the government to come in and do this, blah, blah, blah. No, bugger that. It is our responsibility to start the healing. It's our responsibility to grab each other and hold each other close. It's our responsibility to take responsibility. Yes. And that's the scariest thing in the world, but it's so worth it.
But the thing is, we can. We've got no boundaries. We've got no rules to have to follow like government does, anybody else has.
Absolutely.
We can just get, like you and like what we do, go out and do it.
Yeah.
Just break those shackles of what you think you can and can't do.
Absolutely.
And go out and do it. So...
And that is exactly it. We have the tools to be able to go and do that community stuff, but also it is decolonizing ourselves as well into the ideas that we've had forced on us of what community looks like, because community looks like so many different things.
Yeah.
It's not just your nuclear family. It's not just the things that you're into or your geographic location. Community can look like so many different things, and younger generations are starting to find community in places that we never thought possible.
Yeah.
I know a lot of young people are gaming these days, and they have got just as real community and support through the community they've made in gaming than down at the snooker club or at the rugby club. Those ideas of community are broad, and it is up to us to make sure that those communities are responsible and that those communities have got pathways of taking responsibility, whether that be community justice, whether that be like growth programs or bringing people in, the ownership of our own place in the world.
And I think that's what you're doing, is that you're bringing a community practice, which is going to have a haircut, and applying it to something that's really important for the community at the same time. So, and I think it breaks down that barrier of going, oh, this is something that I can do, that I do all the time. So it's nothing, I don't have to fill out a form, I don't have to do this, I don't have to stand in line at an office or something like that. I can just go see Sam and go have a haircut and a bit of a chat.
But if it takes me to be there, I haven't done my job properly.
Yeah.
Because I need to be able to leave and know that these places keep moving.
Yeah.
That I'm bringing people together in a way that they are self-sustaining. And that's why going into already built communities of people, whether it be special interest, whether it be family whānau, or tribe, finding those places and just putting the 10 cents in there to help lubricate what's already going on. Because there's only one of me, you know?
Exactly.
And I learned very quickly that it is our role to change culture. Because we do have a culture that does not make us healthy.
No.
Our culture is made to sell us and work us to the bone and all those kind of things. The amount of cultural hangovers that we have from other things, which I won't name, they're really important to get through, because we don't have to be martyrs.
No.
We don't have to work ourselves to the bone, and we don't have to be pillars of strength. But what we do have to do is be responsible for ourselves, our actions, and be able to hold those that we love close.
And what you're doing is going out there and throwing a pebble into the water and letting it ripple out to other people. So, Sam, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us and letting us know about the Ken Oath Barber Shop and your plans for the future. Congratulations on the ACT award, and all the best on the Australian awards as well. Yeah, I know. Fingers crossed. Hopefully that goes down well.
Oh, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
I don't take a lot of stock in awards in general. I usually shy away from them because I find them to a lot of the time be corporates trying to align with you with doing nothing. But an award like the Australian Mental Health Foundation, Men's Health Forum, is of my peers and is of the people that I'm working with, and that means a lot to me. Cool. A lot.
Thanks for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for bringing Bobo in too. Good on you, Bobo. You've been very good. So.
Oh yeah, he's ready to go for a run, I think. And thanks for a nuanced conversation. I always enjoy that.
No, that's all right. No, thanks for coming in and sharing with us. That's really good. So.